I would like to give a special acknowledgement to Dr. João, President of ICOM Portugal, also Director of the National Palace. Many thanks for this partnership, which makes possible the organization of this international conference. Also, I would like to thank the Presidents of Dr. Hinz, President of ICOM International, who honored us here in Portugal with his exceptional presence and with his enlightened perspectives and contributions. Our museum is most honored to receive today the International ICOM Portugal's Conference, Museums, One Object, Many Visions, which will be illustrated with the presence of several high-ranking ICOM members for the exchange of ideas and thoughts on current topics concerning cultural heritage and museums. Let me announce Professor Dr. Hinz, President of ICOM International, Professor Susan Bolt, Coordinator of MA Project and Chair of History and Didactics of Augsburg University, Professor Emanardi, President of ICOM Second International, David Willem, President of NEMO, Network European Museum Organization, and Professor Lou Bruckner from Atelier Bruckner and MA member. Fortunately, many of them are going to stay with us all week. This is a great opportunity for Portuguese professionals to share experience and knowledge with them. I wish them and you all a very fruitful meeting. I would like to share with you today this idea. It is fair to say that following the internationalization process and the efforts of the National Museum of Archaeology team in recent years, our institution deserves the honor to have been chosen to host this international conference. During this day, we are going to listen many perspectives about museums in the 21st century, museums' responsibility and value, education perspectives, targets and methods, value of education in museums, objects we must always hold in our museums, etc. Issues absolutely important. Today at night, we are going to open two new exhibitions for our public. First, in our gallery of B-dimensional exhibitions, the result of the European contest of young scenographers. It is an itinerary exhibition around 7 countries of our revision project. And also the new MA exhibition, Europe Through Our Objects, One Object, Many Visions, a selection of 5 important objects of our collection with a transnational lecture presented by a competent work team from the MA Portuguese team, coordinated by Luís, Raposo, and Mário Antas, and Finally, I would also like to take this opportunity to express before you all my, and I could say ours, most deeply contentment and pride for Dr. Luís Raposo, former director of his National Museum of Archaeology and one of his most treasured friends, future candidacy for the President of ICOM Europe. We know all that he will work hard, since he is in his nature, towards a bright future for museums, his collection and his audience, not only in Europe, but also in the rest of the world, making networks and bridges, with special regard to Portuguese-speaking countries. We wish you a good luck. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that you have here today important way to share. Thank you.
Bom dia a todos. Good morning. I'd like to express some kind words for some of you. First of all, dear Director of the National Museum of Archaeology, dear Professor Emanardi, President of Second Committee, dear Professor Hinz, President of ICOM International, dear guests and museum professionals, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends. It's my privilege to open this meeting on behalf of ICOM Portugal and address a very warm welcome to all of you, and special to Professor Hinz. I must thank all of the national and international experts who honored us with their presence, as well as the Portuguese personalities that made this seminar possible, namely Dr. António Carvalho, Director of this museum, for having allowed us to have this meeting here, Dr. Mário Andes from ICOM SECA, for special thanks for organizing this event, as well as the other members of ICOM Portugal and Luís Raposo, of course, named Treasure for our Treasure Fund. It is a great pleasure, as President of ICOM Portugal, to welcome this international seminar in Lisbon, and a great satisfaction to be associated with it. Due to the importance of sharing experience in museums that have enabled the real network, I thank the presence of all of you, and mainly our host and his team, for the hard work they had in organizing this seminar. ICOM, as an international organization of museums and professionals, has grown in our country in its role in the defense of museums professionals and the museums themselves, and also for its positioning ruled by the non-partisan ethics code that bring experience and knowledge at an international level, reason why we are here today in this magnificent museum. And now, let's start our challenging program. Thank you very much. President Martin, please.
Oh ja, o microfone está funcionando. Este microfone está funcionando.
Good morning to everyone. Dear Antonio Carvalho, Director of the National Museum of Archaeology, José Alberto Ribeiro, President of ICOM Portugal, and welcome to all board members of ICOM Portugal, dear Luís, Raposo, representative of ICOM Europe, dear Emma Nardi, Chair of ICOM SECA, dear Susanna Popp, Coordinator of the Eurovision project, and all participating colleagues of the project, dear David David, President of NEMO, and he represents also ICOM Switzerland and the Swiss Museum Association, dear museum colleagues, ICOM members, ladies and gentlemen. President of the International Council of Museums, it is a great honor for me to be with you here today for the International Conference on Museums, One Object, Many Visions. It is a double pleasure to participate in today's conference and in the meetings over the next few days. I would first like to congratulate ICOM Portugal for organizing this event. I last participated in an international conference organized by ICOM Portugal long ago. It was the year 2000 when Portugal held the presidency of the European Union, and an international conference about the education system for museum professionals in Europe took place here in Lisbon. For me, as President of ICOM Germany at this time, it was interesting to learn about the extensive differences across Europe. In several European countries, compulsory university-level programs or academies for museology are offered for those who want to work at museums after their studies. In other countries, it is the opposite. Museum professionals are trained as historians, art historians, geographers, or biologists, and I wonder if this situation is still as diverse as it was 15 years ago. Since my election as president of ICOM in 2010, I have been impressed by the activity of our Portuguese colleagues, including the Conference on Museums in Crisis that culminated with the Lisbon Declaration 3 years ago, an important document that was distributed among top European politicians in Brussels and the member states. Thank you, Luís, and thank you all colleagues who were involved. And I have encountered highly active colleagues from Portugal at international conferences all over the world. And Portuguese colleagues are members of the Eurovision project and hosts of the conference and meetings this week. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you. My second joy is to be here for the 5th general meeting of this European project about the reinterpretation of museum objects and the materialized past, as well as the reinterpretation of the role of museum experts and visitors. As ICOM president, I have the privilege and pleasure to be included in the project as an international advisor, a project which is funded by the European Union's cultural program. This museum development project of partners from museums, universities and private companies is an extremely important one. A wonderful gathering of scientific analysis, curatorial, mediational experiences from museums and architectural and scenographic views on the subject. I congratulate the representatives present from Portugal, Austria, Bulgaria, France, Germany, Italy and Slovenia. And I thank Susanne Bock as coordinator and the entire team from the University of Augsburg for this intensive years-long program. From the beginning, exhibitions have represented the spirit of their time. Scientific research, education, and enjoyment were always part of conceptions and presentations. In their service for society, museums help stabilize identities. Today we may criticize the way culture and history were presented, for example, in the national museums of the 19th century. But in time of rapid changes from agrarian to industrial societies and nation building, this was probably the best museums could do, presenting the past as a golden age to make people proud of belonging to the nation. In the meantime, the world has completely changed, as have the challenges for museums. As a consequence, the interpretation of the past through historical and cultural objects has changed as well. Museums, one object, many visions, the theme of this conference precisely meets the needs of many museums, probably museums all over the globe, because we live in an increasingly globalized world, and museums need to offer different views on culture and history in order to allow visitors to better understand the world. This year, 2016, the International Council of Museums celebrates its 70th anniversary during the ICOM General Conference, which will take place in Milan, in Italy, in early July. We expect about 3,000, 4,000 participants, will commemorate 70 years of work for the global museum community, the protection of cultural heritage within and outside of museums, and the role that ICOM has played as a forum for for international dialogue among museum professionals at an international level. Such a birthday is also a perfect opportunity to define our current position and what ICOM should contribute in terms of the future development of museums, the role they have in explaining, protecting, and developing nature and culture for a more peaceful global world. The role of museums in the service of society must be continually discussed among museum professionals, politicians, and museum owners, not only to ensure that museums strive to be frontrunners in exchanging information and dialogue about history, culture, and nature, but also to promote sustainable practices and ongoing education through the use of their resources. People, visitors, and communities should gain value from museum resources and presentations to develop an inquiring consciousness that stimulates us all in understanding the past and the present. As President of the International Council of Museums, I strongly support the international dialogue of the global museum community, which our many national and international committees, the regional alliances, and affiliated organizations pursue year after year. This has a strong impact on our strategic thinking, our ethical behavior, and our programs, and can advance the quality and variety of our daily work for museums of all kinds. It is worth recalling that ICOM was founded only 1 year after UNESCO, at a time when the world was trying to repair the profound devastations brought by years of war and political conflicts. Museum colleagues were among the first activists to meet the challenges of the post-war era in rebuilding a better world. ICOM began on a rather modest scale in November 1946, but with an expansive vision led by a foremost American museum professional, John C. Hamlin. He became the first ICOM president later, who had the support of Georges Salle, at that time director of French museums. The organization consolidated its influence. At a gathering chaired by Hamlin, representatives from 14 countries came together for a meeting at the Louvre Museum in Paris. This was the beginning of the largest international cultural organization in terms of membership, which counted museum colleagues from some 140 countries. The founding purpose of ICOM was to create an international organization that would facilitate cooperation among museums following the terrible period of multiple wars and their accompanying destructions with global consequences on a previously unimaginable scale. This international museum organization was conceived as a council of museum leaders who would build a network for professional interactions beyond governmental bodies that represent the political sphere of international relations. It was acknowledged that museums hold specialized knowledge, cultural resources, and high standards of ethical values, which altogether could promote a better understanding of an interconnected human history. They were also called upon to intervene by protecting a shared universal heritage. The promotion of high standards for museums, including the strong values of cooperative endeavor and public service, was and remains a fundamental aspiration of the founders of ICOM as an international museum organization. Museums all over the world have to meet a twofold challenge. Firstly, explaining where we come from and what place we hold in nature. And secondly, exploring who we are and how we can develop a shared future. Through international cooperation, this affirmative effort by museums strove to enable visitors to understand the past and society to advance in terms of sustainable development by means of a high degree of participation that called for the full respect of human values which were to be shared by all. 70 years of sustained international dialogue among museum professionals is a great track record of success for ICOM. Today, we count over 35,000 members worldwide. The common ground of ICOM's work is a strong moral purpose to maintain positive cooperation among diverse peoples and nations, which is valid everywhere and well recognized by individual societies and their political representatives, including parliaments and governments. The most important tool in advancing and protecting our shared goals is the ICOM Code of Ethics for Museums, which represents a set of fundamental standards to pursue our values and visions and clearly define the responsibilities we have for preserving culture and natural heritage, both tangible and intangible. These standards include principles for governance and operation of museums and the preservation of their collections. They provide frameworks for the mediation of conflicts concerning the interpretation and ownership of cultural property. The standards also include principles of ethical behavior for employees, guiding the attitudes of all people working in and for museums. Ethical codes for professional practice on a national basis are much older and go back to the early 20th century. What sets the ICOM Code for Ethics apart is its international reach. It aims to provide standards underpinning and linking all national or more discipline-specific codes and therefore provides a unifying framework for the protection of standards in museums everywhere. Just as the ICOM Code of Ethics has also been accepted as an international reference document for museum work in various countries by their own museum laws, it is often acknowledged in the documents of parliaments and governments at a national level as well. Guided by this international framework for ethical standards, museums are increasingly taking on an active role in protecting important parts of global world heritage in their collections and cooperative programs multilaterally, as well as beyond museums, especially when cultural heritage is at risk, often due to social uprisings, armed conflicts, and natural disasters. I would just like to remind you of ICOM's Red List program for cultural heritage at risk and the 15 years that have been published since 2000. This international program has helped identify many illegally exported objects which have been returned to the countries of origin. With its important work, ICOM is a well-recognized international partner of UNESCO. In 2015, last year, the UNESCO General Conference approved a recommendation for protecting museums and collections which was drafted by the ICOM. This is UNESCO's first museum document in 55 years. The discussion about museum values and standards within ICOM, which intensified in the late 60s and gathered strength again in the 1980s, leading to the first comprehensive ICOM code, has never ceased. It has carried out during countless ICOM gatherings around the globe, including the long-standing discussion about updating the definition of museums and the new task our institutions are taking on today. In our quickly changing world, the challenges museums are facing in the digitally driven environment of communications today are also modifying the ways in which museums carry out their work and engage with multiple audiences. Museums compete with numerous media forces today, yet still aim to be inclusive in terms of broad content and target groups, which often means continuing to protect the public values of culture among minorities and beyond, so daily market-driven forces in the arena of commercial exchange. What is the perception of museums today, and how will these change tomorrow? What will make museums attractive to visitors and online audiences many years from now? What ongoing and new role will they play for local populations, visitors and tourists, regions, nations, and international communities? Over the past decades, museum professionals have acquired countless new skills and positive experiences through visitor-oriented museum policies, in exhibitions and online presentations. Museums have become more participatory and inclusive institutions, producing multi-perspective explanations of nature, history, and culture. In many countries, museums are places of reconciliation, explaining the dark side of history and commemorate the victims of violence from colonialism, war, dictatorship, flight, and expulsion. ICOM and museums in many areas have strengthened ties between groups, communities, and nations through cross-border activities and international cooperative programs. What is different from earlier times, however, and what we have to take into consideration today is the greater public awareness of and media interest in museum work, encompassing ethical work issues, collection practices, exhibitions, public programming, museum collections, and cultural heritage at large. The communication-driven environment of daily life now accelerates all discussions exponentially and challenges museums' work in all parts of the world. Nevertheless, some things have not changed. The core incentive for the future development of our work will continue to be ethical values and the ethical responsibilities we share in our work on behalf of the natural and cultural heritage of all. Affirming this durable framework of values, we must review and renew the ethical framework of museum work as an ongoing responsibility. This constant reviewing and updating of standards should be pursued in cooperation with all those responsible for museums, especially governmental proprietors and leaders of the political sphere, in order to advance the cause of museums in their protection of unique interconnected heritage ICOM is an ideal association for continuous international exchange and dialogue among museum experts. ICOM's national committees, almost 120 and 30 international committees, do a great job by organizing major meetings every year. ICOM is a global organization, but not all parts of the world, museums or museum professionals are able to participate in the ICOM network's activities. In order to balance the situation and help the more underrepresented areas, we have established an ICOM International Training Center for Museum Studies in Beijing, in China, which holds several sessions per year involving different participants, notably colleagues from poorer countries, younger colleagues, and middle management first and foremost. Beijing, this ITC, International Training Center, has become a model for other parts of the world. In Africa, we started with a pilot program in Tanzania last year, and may get a permanent ICOM International Training Center for Africa in the near future. Another pilot project will take place later this year in the Arab world, when the ICOM International Training Center for Museum Studies meets in Doha, Qatar. There are more ICOM activities in areas where we were not presented in the past, from Africa to the Arctic, thus allowing for the inclusion of museums and colleagues from those regions in the worldwide network of our profession. Once again, I thank you all for your attendance and participation. I wish our ICOM committees, especially ICOM Portugal, only success and the best luck in their endeavors. And I wish the Eurovision program a great success as well. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Especially to our president, to our director at the museum, to my colleague, successor in the chairing of ICOM Portugal, and to you all, of course, and I will try to be brief because the subject is so large that we'll stand here for a week or more talking about this topic. I will try to, as I said, to be short, even because we have a long journey and the main topic of the journey is not so much this one. European museums and European landmark. We can, at the beginning, we can maybe think that this is given as an acquis, taken as granted, and no one would maybe need to reflect, to think on that subject. But nevertheless, I think it is for us good, as I use for most, maybe everyone here, to return back to this key concept, the museum as an European key landmark. This is not only so much because of historical past question, but mainly because of future perspective we can envisage from now on. Let me sit down so that I can see better. The first idea is that we can still considered and taken as guaranteed, as I said, that Europeans love museums more than like museums. Europeans love museums. This is one of the labeling phrases used by the British Association of Museums, or the UK, or better say, Association of Museums. And in fact, the economic impact of museums in the UK, as in the entire Europe, is immense. I think I have somewhere here, well, further on, some data on the issue. But the idea of loving museums should maybe be perspectivated in our time and put it in balance with other resources, other devices, other cultural equipments, which are very much in the mood, in fashionable devices. And to better understand where we are really and where we are supposed to go from here on. And I think we have to face our relationship between several other cultural devices. But first of all, let me take the example of thematic parks. Thematic parks are undoubtedly one of the most successful cultural devices in the entire world. And we museums, we have to learn a lot with them. But, and that is my point of view, we are different. And we have to be different. And that belongs to our landmark European perspective. You see, if we take the last numbers I got, on the world report on attendance to cultural institutions, we can see that on the 20 most visited thematic parks in the world, only 2 are Europeans. And the 2 European thematic parks integrated in this list are American franchises. Euro Disney and the Eurasian studies both of them in Paris, as you know. And of course they are very good to visit. I myself, I love to promenade there, to go there, but they are not real museums, as we all know, and can be on that. And it's interesting to note that this kind of very successful and important and enjoyable spaces are for the most not in European nature. We Europeans, of course, we have to do a lot in this sense, but that's not our main trademark. On the contrary, if we take the numbers of rated museums, the most visited museums in the world, this one, we see that half of them, maybe in 20, are Europeans. And the difference, I think that refer to the millions, the number of visitors, but the difference between the number of visitors to the most 20, the other continents, thematic park museums most visited, and the European ones, it is not so dramatic. So, in the world, we have half or more than half of the most visited museums in Europe, and the number of visitors in those museums is very high in global terms. So we did, this is enough. Many other things could be said, but I think these figures are enough to make the point, my point. Museums are really the true, the real European landmark. Not so much thematic parks, not so much Euro business, world business, and so on. Both are necessary for an healthy society, of course. And I'm sure each one of us appreciates to be in both, but they are different. And our basic play, are museums. So, again, Europeans love museums. But not only Europeans. We have to learn a lot, balancing what I said before, with other continents, and especially with America, of course, where the concept of thematic park in America and also in the Far East is developing very fast. Museums are, and here is my slide which I mentioned before, an economic engine, a very, very, very important economic engine. Everywhere, especially in Europe, where they are the trademark. For instance, these figures, these numbers relating to UK have already 2-3 years ago, but the basic situation is the same. And 2 billion pounds are the impact of museums in the economy of the UK. 1.28 billion are the direct and indirect revenue of national museums, for a public spending of only 650 million. So they generate income, and a lot of income. 4 in 5 tourists in UK say that they go to UK as one of the top reasons to see museums. 1 to 3.5 is the gain obtained by the special, very polemic, of course, but the politic adopted since 15 years ago in UK of free entrance in the permanent exhibitions of national museums. This, as there are a lot of doubtful and definitive economic studies proving that, for instance, in London, the impact of gratuity in permanent, and only national public museums has generated income and economic income tremendous. So museums are economic engines. We should perhaps be more proactive in pointing out these values. Like, for instance, in America. And that's why I said we have a lot to learn in business. In America, the American Association of Museums acts as a strong, very strong lobbying force. Each year there is the Museums Advocacy Day. I don't remember to have so much of this initiatives in Europe. And I wonder why. Maybe because we gave museums as guaranteed, as something that ever existed, will exist always, and is not necessary to promote the remainder thereof. We have to advocate, to make strong advocacy for museums. And this advocacy day is composed by several parts, including lobbying on the Senate, on the Congress, American Congress, at the national level, also regional and local levels, and the immense, massive distribution of flyers with what they call museum stamps. And museum stamps, these flyers are distributed everywhere to everybody, in metro stations, underground tube stations, everywhere, during the day of the advocacy day of museums. And claiming things like this: museums serve the public, museums are trustworthy. In fact, in sociological inquiries, when it is inquired to the public, general citizens, which institution they trust more, museums are at the top. Museums are popular, museums partner with schools, museums serve every community, and each community, not the public in general, but particular, specific public, specific communities. Museums serve safe spaces, an issue which is also very acute in several countries, in the world in general. And finally, again, the idea that museums are economic engines. So we have to learn with the stats. But also we have our own reflections, our own thinking forces. And there are a lot. It will be, of course, impossible to present here all the European reports relating the importance of museums as European landmarks. Let me show only two or three of them. This one is an Italian one. It's composed by, it's at our disposal in the internet to download 3 volumes on this topic. European museums in the 21st century, setting the framework. Of course, each one of these reports which are available is partial, gives partial visions of the subject. Is it possible to encompass everything in an only one document? This one, the Italian one, has been generated by MELA, European Museums in the Age, of migrations. Migration is a key topic today in Europe, everywhere in Europe especially. And I suggest you strongly to download, obtain this in the internet, and to read and to study these proceedings. And these are the main chapters in this volume. National history museums, ethnographic and rural culture museums, migration museums, city museums, local museums, war museums, temporary exhibitions. Here we have an overview of concerns, perspectives, present questions which are being worked in Europe. Another important report, set of reports, thousands of pages, at our disposal in the internet, are the reports made in the frame of this European National Museums project, which has already finished and has produced an immense quantity of data. There are 9 reports in total, each one referring to different issues of national museums. And the concept of national museum, the nature of national museums, is also another very hot issue in Europe today. We in Portugal, and we had our own experience, we are not so much concerned with this, because we are a non-unitary state since the 12th century onwards, maybe one of the oldest, if not the oldest, nation state in Europe. So we don't really, we Portuguese, we don't really feel the question. But when we are discussing with colleagues from Central, Eastern Europe, the question is really, and even of course in the states which are composed by several nations like UK, the question is a very, very hot and sensitive question today in Europe. The third, maybe the last one, I've chosen only to give a glimpse at the question. Important work has been done by Learning Museum Network Project, with several reports also. This is the 7th one. New trends in museums for the 21st century. Also, all this material is at our disposal in the internet. Up to us to take advantage of this. The work done by LAM, this report in particular, is extremely rich in suggestions. For instance, the key chapter done by Massimo Negri is really important to read, to see, to reflect on. I will not pass, because I said I wanted to be short. Each one of the statements or suggestions or ideas here, which are presented here. I would like to do the homework to download the document and to study the document, because it deserves to be really. There are also, of course, for instance, today we have here the President, one of the most important European networks is DIMO. Also with enormous and huge work currently being done. And I'm sorry to have not present here a specific report, even if LAM, if I don't think, is now integrated in DIMO, has finished the project now. I myself, I belong to DIMO via LAM. And then there are also a myriad of other papers, reflections on the importance of museums in Europe, the need for renewal, and here is the last topic I wanted to emphasize. We are, and we should have always in mind this, we are really a landmark in Europe, but nothing is even as granted forever. I myself am very optimistic on the future of museums in general in the world and specifically in Europe. The most national tensions, the most regionalism by opposition on nationalities, the local developments in opposition to centralization. The most these issues are developed, the most museums are needed. And this is the basis for my philosophical optimism relating museums. But nothing is given as guaranteed, I agree. And the renewal strategies are essential. I listed some of them there in a speech I made in St. Petersburg during a conference organized by ICOM Russia, ICOM USA, and ICOM Germany. But many others are possible, I will not. And finally, let's be open to other continents. If, as in a change of views in Facebook yesterday with other colleagues, I commented, if English is not the only language to express theory on museums, as in everything else, if the concept of thinking in other language is not a courtier of English language speaking, we also, Europeans, are not the illuminated vanguard of the world. There are, beginning with, of course, North America and the USA, with whom we have a lot to learn with, because they know how to sell materials, stuff. And we have immense learning to do, to accomplish with, for instance, Latin America, where the work in museums is in many aspects much more developed than in Europe. And with other continents, of course. So let's be open minds. Let's see others, how they are working. And I will only, for instance, not Latin American should be an example to be taken here. We in ICOM Europe, we have promoted recently, and we are waiting for the approval, hopefully, of a project linking Europe and Latin America in community museums, which is one of the strong domains in museology or museums in Latin America. But to this, at our disposal again in internet, it is enough to just to download and to study these reports, annual reports, American ones, to find an immense, huge quantity of suggestions for the future. So, optimistic, yes, from the philosophical point of view, but realistic from the practical one. We have to fight for the future in Europe also. Thank you. I think we have a coffee break.
Few decades for better. When I speak about German experiences, because I'm from Germany, but I can also talk about others. But my impression is that the work with schools, with groups or with target groups has developed a lot, and is the core of the work of many museums right now. And I think there is museum visits are more and more included in the curricula of the schools everywhere in primary and secondary schools. we are on a very good way to have all of them included, and this is made much better than it was, let's say, 30 years ago. But maybe that's a question for an exchange about your experiences in different parts of the country or different parts of the world.
Thank you so much.
Luís Raposo, banalization of the...
Yes, I think the fear for banalization of museum is justified. It's a me too. I have that reflection, concern sometimes. We used to say in philosophy in general that when something is everything is nothing. So if everything is a museum, the museum lost identity. And that's why in ICOM, to begin with, but also in national legislation, like the Portuguese one, we put limits, clear limits to the concept of museum. Operational, conceptual ones, and operational ones. We in Portugal, for instance, in our law, which is, I would not say, I was to say perfect, but almost perfect, if not perfect, perfectness doesn't exist, but anyway, almost perfect law, done by several colleagues and politicians at the end, among them here, Clara Camacho, and Melo, many others which are here now. We put limits, use basically the ICOM definition, with some adaptations, but basically the ICOM definition, and a museum to be museum has to be first of all defined by its mission and functions, several functions which are listed. And then has to have staff, professional staff, depending on each country, depending on each museum, a lot or at least one, and budget. This is what should be and what our law claims to be. This is not what even in Portugal we are nowadays in practice doing, which is a pity for the less. But this is so with this kind of definition, museums are limited, and is not a so light option to be taken with no concern. And it is completely reasonable that each administration, public or private, local, national, regional, can have alternative options to the museum to develop culture and heritage and communities. Museum is only one possible device, and I repeat, not the lightest one. In Portugal, in our legislation, we have another legal concept, visited collection, which is not a museum, or others, interpretative center, and so on and so on. So the banalization of the concept of museum also worries me from this serious point of view. And apart of this, there are the misuse of the level museum. There are a lot of only commercial projects which adopt the prestigious level museum, but they are not museums at all. And they appear everywhere in our countries, in all others. So that's what I...
Thank you so much.
Now.
Hello, my name is Inês Galvão. I'm the manager of a local authority museum, and my question pertains to the issue. You've been talking a lot about diversity, multiculturalism, and the role of museums in promoting these ideals. And my question pertains to how museums at a small scale can actually do this especially if they are in homogeneous communities. So diversity is not immediately available to engage and to represent. And on the other hand, how are we as museum professionals supposed to promote diversity and multiculturalism if our collections don't promote it? And if we as a museum team don't promote, we are not diverse. We are an extremely homogeneous group. In Europe in general, in specific countries in particular, and this is a problem that has been already pinpointed in America, and there's already a strong lobbying element in America to change things, but I don't see that as a concern of us as museum professionals. We are still at the level where we're fighting for our teams to be multidisciplinary when we program, and that is already a difficult battle to fight. But we are not yet concerned about our own diversity when we construct programming. Thank you.
I think it's hard to give a general answer to what the task of small museums is, because in my view, even small museums have very different tasks. It depends where they are located, what the historical background of the location or the region or whatever it is. And probably there are areas where it's hard to find an issue or a theme to explain the diversity of society. But if you see the development of neighborhood museums everywhere on Earth, you see there is already, there has something changed. You know, many of, especially in Europe, many small towns or cities have faced changes during the last 38 years. And if you go back to the 70s and remember the permanent exhibitions of city museums or neighborhood museums, it was a bit the story of the bourgeois or the working class people of the 19th century, and but today this has changed. The same museums today offer a lot of stories of the new inhabitants of the town, and in many parts of these cities there are new inhabitants coming from Central Europe, from the Mediterranean area, in the 60s, 70s. Now we have a lot of refugees. How should the communities deal with that question? How to integrate them? How can they tell their story? And in order to identify with the new home, with the new or what we say in German, Heimat, and how can the traditional inhabitants learn from the new from the migrants or the guest workers or however you call these new groups. So if you have a look at our committee for city museums, CAPON is dealing with that question very intensively, and I have the impression that there's also a lot of discussions going on in the exhibition, so this has an impact on the everyday work. And if you compare exhibitions of city museums or neighborhood museums of today with those of the past, you see the difference.
Thank you so much. Coffee break.